Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists.
Well, folks, here we are back at the Independent Artist Podcast. It's Douglas and I, and we've got a killer guest for you this week. We kind of teased it a little bit last week.
Kinda.
Yeah. We just said who it was going to be. That's not really a tease. Like, here it is. Sarah Umlauf from St. Louis Arts Festival in Clayton, Missouri is joining us, and I appreciate you hooking us up with that one, Douglas.
You know what? I don't even think we need to waste any time with a blah, blah, blah introduction. I think we should just cut to the interview.
Do it. Let's go. She's here joining us, and let's get right to it.
Awesome. We're so happy to have Sarah Umlauf, the director of the St. Louis Art Fair in Clayton, Missouri, with us today. But I have to say, Will and I are pretty ballsy, thinking that we can get an hour of your time leading up to the big show here coming up. So thank you for joining us.
No, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation. It's very kind.
It's a testament to the tight run ship that you've got that you actually have any time for us a couple weeks before the show kicks off. So my wife is in her studio frantically getting ready.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear.
And it's been a big week here for you. You just did the poster kickoff last Thursday, I believe, right? You want to tell us a little bit about it, even though it'll be old news in 2 weeks, I'm sure.
I know, right? So on Thursday, usually about a month before our show, we hold what we call our kickoff party and commemorative print reveal. And it's always very exciting. We are very close-lipped about who the commemorative print artist is each year. It's just a small group of people that know ahead of time. It's myself, my staff, and of course the printer who's printing that. So it's always a very exciting moment when that print is revealed.
Does the artist know? Like, are there some in contention and they don't know? Or
No, the artist does know because we do bring the print artist in for the event itself. And it is funny because you will see, especially our regular attendees to this kickoff party, definitely looking around, seeing if they can notice any artists that they don't recognize or that may be in from out of town, trying to figure out who it might be ahead of the reveal. So it's always very fun event. And I know it's a great event for our board, for our sponsors, for our volunteers, and of course for our local artists who get to come and attend as well. So it's always a great night. We were thrilled to highlight an artist that I'm not familiar with. I just for the first time met her. Her name is Margaret Baker out of Florida, and she's an oil painter. Her work this year, though, just really resonated with our office, with our staff, and we feel it is a great way to celebrate this year's art fair. We have been in business since 1994, and the tagline for this year's event is a celebration of art since 1994. So we've been feeling very vintage in the office. And so, nice. This print really helps to encapsulate all those feelings, all those emotions of a bygone era, a time long past. And it's been really fun to, to meet this artist, Margaret, for the first time. And it was really wonderful.
I think what's cool about a lot of these shows, and your show in particular that picks the artist, it's kind of a perk for you guys, isn't it? Just kind of a perk for you and your staff. It's post-jury, and it's something that you guys get to do. Is that true?
It is, but we do like to have buy-in from our key stakeholders. And so something that I implemented a few years ago is I started to send out a survey of our staff's top 10 to 12 picks, our selections that we, again, are feeling the strongest connections to. And we send that out to our board of directors, to our event management team, which are like our volunteer committee chairs, and to a few other folks. So we do receive some buy-in. And that's been really wonderful for us because it gives me a way in a small sense to just see how the public is reacting to certain pieces over others. So it's been really nice to implement.
So the ultimate decision is made by consensus, or how is it decided?
So the final decision is a staff decision, but we do take into account those survey results. Cool. And so we take the survey And then my staff makes a final decision on the final piece.
Is Margaret somebody that was in the show last year?
No, Margaret is new.
Margaret
is first time applicant, first time in the show.
Very cool. So they're basing this off of just their zaps and application.
Correct. They're basing it off of image only. It is just through that survey. It's just a reaction to that image. We do not assign names to those images in the survey. It is just this is the proposed image. How are you responding to it this year? And so those survey results help to guide us into what others are feeling connected to. Because while it is something that means a great deal to the St. Louis Art Fair, it's a tradition, we do know that it's also a strong marketing piece for the show. And it is an image that is going to be out there on the program guide. It's going to be sent out to our local news stations. And so we really love to, again, see how people are reacting to it. If it's a strong reaction, then we know we've got a good marketing piece. And so that's really important for the lead up to the show as well.
And you guys have a couple of different artists that you feature, because you have a separate artist like Keith Grace is going to be your, what is that called? How do you
t-shirt artists, as we call them, our official t-shirt artist. Yes. And awesome. Keith's work was actually, one that we had been, again, feeling a strong connection to with this vintage theme that we have going on this year. Of course, Keith's work really plays strongly into that vintage feel. Mm-hmm. And he is he is somebody that we know, we respect. He's a fantastic artist. And so it was very wonderful. He was my first call this year, because we do try to identify our t-shirt artists early, because it's such an important piece in our volunteer recruitment. So something we do in St. Louis is our t-shirt artists, their artwork is featured on all of our volunteer t-shirts. And a lot of our volunteers wait to see what's the t-shirt going to be this year before they sign up. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah. So it's a big component. And we're really excited that Keith agreed to this.
Man. We clearly think highly of Keith here.
Totally.
He's amazing. So that's a great pick. It's funny, I was just online looking at that and it popped up and I'm like, definitely going to ask her about that, because I thought he did an amazing job with his figurative work, and kind of the people kind of pulls you into the different people that show up to the show and the people that are the crowds, and just taking a face from the crowd kind of feel.
And the energy, the energy of his work is phenomenal.
Yes,
exactly.
And he was very gracious to work with as well, because he is really focusing on these figurative works now, because style has been changing. But he did allow us to use some of his animals in a couple of the shirts. So I really appreciate Keith for allowing us to do that. It was very, very cool of him to work with us on that.
Well, your show is a competitive show to get into. How many applicants did you get this year for your show, and how many exhibitors are juried in?
Yeah, so I'm really excited that we are finally getting to what I say is full strength again, post-pandemic. It's taken us some time to get there, but we're finally seeing our applications creep up. We're back close to 1,100 applications, which is similar to pre-pandemic levels. And so we're back to 190 artist booths, which is really our maximum that we'll do in St. Louis. We're just under 200 booths. The only thing that's slightly different this year is it's our first year giving double booths a try. So there will be a couple of artists who juried in under 2 applications that were given the option to choose a double booth. And so there will be a few double booths at the show this year.
That's cool. Okay. I think that'll help break up the show and the way it feels when you're walking through it, especially, coming from an artist, I like to have a lot more space, so I'm partial to the double booth.
And Erica Iman won't have to have the booth mullet this year, right?
Erica is going for single, though. There are quite a few artists that really, yes. There were quite a few artists that juried in with 2 applications that said, no, I'm going to stick with the 10 by 10, which I totally respect. And so that's why I said there's only going to be a few of them out there.
That's funny. Yeah, I was lucky enough. I feel like ever since we had them on the show, I've been lucky enough to have them like close by. And I could not think more highly of them. But I really just want to talk to their daughter because she's so funny. Like she's so cute and she's so
She is.
funny. Like it just brings a lot of life to your kind of your day. Really, that kind of the youthful energy. It's like having a puppy around, right?
No, a funny story is I think it was my first year as executive director for the St. Louis Art Fair, and we were in the jury selection room for on-site jury. We only had one of Erica's images, and I had to run back to the office and print up her second application for the jurors so they could review before their final awards. And long story short,
because she has two bodies of work.
She
I'm
has
sorry
two
to
bodies
interrupt,
of work.
but so the listeners who don't
Exactly.
know. Yeah, okay.
So I ran to my office, printed up that second image. I'm running back. I get in the elevator of the hotel, and I've got Erica's image, just in my hands, as you can see, right in front of me, holding it in front. And in walks Eric and their daughter. And I'm like, and I start to turn it around and, trying to hide it from them. I don't think they even knew, but I'm just awkwardly making conversation. So what you guys do today? And they had just come from the zoo. I mean, it was really adorable. We started talking about bears, and they were really cool. And I think I was able to get through that without them seeing.
Your poker face was on, right?
Yeah, I was trying. It's really hard for me to keep a poker face at that time of the festival, but I think I made it through.
When you're talking about taking over that show, how long have you been executive director of the show?
Yeah, so I became executive director in 2019. Yeah. I started my tenure. It was right around jury. So I had not been hired yet, but I sat in on the jury process in April of that year with Cindy Larrick, who was heading up jury for us that year. And so really, I was very grateful that I was able to be a part of jury for the first show. And then 2019, it all started.
First show, and then everything goes to hell.
And then everything happened. Yeah.
And were you working with the show in another capacity before that, or was that your first exposure to being with the show?
That's a great question. I actually had a long relationship with the St. Louis Art Fair prior to becoming executive director. I had worked for the city of Clayton, Missouri for about 13 years. And that is where the St. Louis Art Fair takes place. It takes place on, the streets of downtown Clayton. I had been a student of art history, loved fine art. And so I remember the staff at the city of Clayton, they all looked at me like, well, Sarah, isn't this something you'd want to help out with? And I'm like, of course, I'd love to. Yeah. And then I knew a board member, and the board member asked if I would be a committee chair. And I said, of course, love to. So I became a committee chair for artist relations and served in that role for about 12 years until I became executive director.
Wow.
It's interesting to me, like when I do the show, how many directors I see at the show.
Yeah.
How does that come about? Because I know like Stephen King in the past, and I think still runs your
yes
emerging artist program.
And, yeah, right.
You've got all these kind of bigwigs around, just kind of helping out. It's kind of amazing.
Thank you for saying that, but it's really because I am not ashamed to ask for help and ask for advice and to reach out to my colleagues and to continue relationships. Stephen King had been our emerging artists coordinator prior to me becoming executive director. And I loved working with Stephen. And that was definitely something that I was hoping to hold on to and hold near and dear. So thankfully, Stephen is still working with us, and still, as Stephen says, and I agree with him, I mean, these emerging artist program are really such a fantastic way to, breathe some life into our industry.
For sure.
The whole point behind the emerging artist program is not just to find new talent, nurture new talent, but it's also to help introduce these artists to the rules, what they should and shouldn't do. So it's a training ground to hopefully prepare artists for this industry, but also to do it in a thoughtful way. So they're filling out their forms correctly. Their applications are looking pristine. We really want them to have the best chance possible, and also to be good citizens in the art festival industry. So
it's huge.
and Stephen sees that, and he sees how important it is and wants to be a part of that as well.
The component that I'm a real fan of with what you do is pairing the emerging artists with other artists on the street. It isn't just like, here's a spot for you, figure it out for yourself. It's really like mentoring and tutoring and real life experience. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it is definitely. It's a 2-year program. And so our first year emerging artists, that is their mission, is mentorship. We're like, you need to be on the ground, you need to meet these artists, see what it's like. And so the mentorship component is so important for these first year emerging artist students, so that by year 2, as we're really fine tuning their applications and discussing things like taxes and reporting and all that stuff, that they know what they're doing. They're set up for success for when they do exhibit at the show. And so that's why it's such an involved, lengthy program.
I like that. There are emerging artists in your program that I look forward to kind of going back and seeing because, I've done a little bit of mentoring with them, just been involved with the program a little bit, and seeing some of those folks come back, and I'm like, oh man, he really took, this that he was talking about doing and expanded it into the next thing. And the fact that they listen and are involved with that, some of them, there was one I had that was, he didn't listen at all. He was telling me how to do my things, and now you're going to go do this. And I'm like, yeah, buddy, you tell me, you tell me how to do it. Bless your heart.
It's like anything, you get out of it what you put into it. And when you have a mentee who's going to tell the mentor how it's done, well, they might not learn too much new information, I guess.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely, this program, it shakes it all loose. You either have those emerging artists who take what they learn and thrive, or you have those that are like, this isn't for me, and we don't see them again. It is,
but that's good. I mean, really, there are people who learn the expensive way that it isn't for them. And this is more of a foothold before you invest in all the everything involved in being on the road,
Yeah, it's like photography. You have to take 100 images in order to have one keeper. It's the emerging artist program. It's like, how many folks do you know that continue to do it and thrive during it? I mean, and I think well, actually, that's just my question. So you answer it. Do you have any idea of the folks that still do it and have been in your program?
I am in touch with quite a few of them. I always am very excited when our former emerging artists jury back into the show.
Yeah.
And this year we're going to see 4 former emerging artists exhibiting at the St. Louis Art Fair as juried artists. And that's so
fantastic.
Exciting. It's so awesome. Exciting. Yeah. Very proud.
And they're just straight jury. Like, I know, doesn't the winner of emerging, you tell me, but.
No, you're right. We do have what we call as our Emerging Artist Best in Show Award. It's named after Katie Toll. So it's the Katie Toll Emerging Artist Best in Show. And that artist does return. They're given a bypass for the next year's show. And so, so last year's Best in Show will be back and exhibiting at this year's show.
Do they get any kind of help with that as far as like booth setup, or are you just kind of thrown to the wolves at that point? You've been through 2 years, get to work.
Yeah. Well, luckily, this artist who did win Best in Show, she had previously won a grant through a local arts organization. So she was able to upgrade her display. So I know she's ready to go. But in the event that they are not, we have such a great network of local artists here in St. Louis that are willing to step up and help help provide display, help provide pro panels. So we do have a network that we lean on, and we have leaned on in the past for those artists to make sure that, again, they have a great display when they're back in St. Louis.
What is the typical profile of an emerging artist who's applying for the program? I mean, is it an artist who, let's say, is right out of art school, or is it somebody who has been making art for a while, but they've just never exhibited outdoors on the street, and they want to give that market a try?
All of the above. Yes,
Okay.
it is really.
Right.
So the typical applicant, yes, has some training, whether it be, whether they have an MFA or, bachelor's. So you're right. They have some schooling or some training that has brought them to this application. Some of them have recently relocated to St. Louis. So they are not from this region, but have relocated to here. So every once in a while, though, we do also have those looking for a second career. They're starting to, wade into the waters of what it might be to pursue this as a career. So they are either retired or recently retired and then trying this program out. So it really runs the gamut. And in fact, this year we have a first-year emerging artist who is 16 years old. So
Wow.
still in high school, but their application was phenomenal. It was funny. Their mother reached out to our office first, and I'm like, I agree with you, Mom. I agree with you, Mom. The work is great, but I'm not working with you. I'm only going to work with your kid. And unless that's okay,
Yeah.
I don't want his application. From then on, she backed off and let her kid take the lead. So it's been nice.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Cool.
What skills too even just talking to you and talking to the program and having to deal with that without the parent around. I'm just thinking about my own kids being 16 and 14, and I think she could handle it, but sometimes you meet these kids and they just kind of look at you and like, you gotta use your words. You can't just text her later. You gotta talk.
Right.
Man.
Yeah. But before we get off the subject, though, I just want to point out over my shoulder on my wall, that's a painting by one of our emerging artists from last year, Taylor Marie.
Oh, cool.
Awesome.
And we always try to collect in our household, myself and my partner, we always try to collect at least one piece from the emerging artist booth every year. And
It's fantastic.
I never know what it's going to be. He makes the choice. And so
that's cool.
Yeah. And so it's really great because I always say I can't make decisions like that art fair weekend, but if you pick something, I'm on board. So
Wow.
Nice. This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
Will, I sat down last week and started looking over what shows are listed in Zap that I want to apply to for the next season.
Oh, thanks for the panic attack. I appreciate that. I haven't even begun.
Oh.
No, I really appreciate what they're doing for us as an industry.
It's not just about us artists. It's also about the shows. They get to jury their show using our application images, and then the shows can manage all of our information using Zap's online platform.
I don't know about you, but I find myself late night doom scrolling after that first rejection of the season, so it's always helpful to me to have everything in one place.
Yeah.
Well, folks, looks like we have a call to entry this week. I always feel like this particular show is almost like the beginning of the show season for me. Douglas, how about you?
I agree. I feel like that kind of kicks off the Florida season, but also, like you said, the calendar year. The show we're talking about, everyone, is the Coconut Grove Arts Festival. It's in a beautiful little community just outside of Miami.
Yep, it used to be dripping in cocaine money, and now it's got regular rich people. So, a good spot to be in the winter months. Good way to get away from the winter doldrums,
and also to make some good cash. Now, this is a show that has undergone a little bit of a transition over the past few years.
It's had its ups and downs, but it is in full control by our good friend Camille Marchese. You can listen back to one of her episodes in last season. Was it last season? I don't remember.
It absolutely was last season, Will. As many of you might remember from that episode, she was hired by Monty Traynor, the president of the Coconut Grove Arts Festival, because he recognized her passion and dedication to the artist community. And now Monty has become the president emeritus, and she has stepped into those shoes, and she's running the whole thing.
Well, she has the goal of wanting to have the best show in the country. She's got a little ego on her, and we like that because it plays back into our pockets, hopefully making our pockets a little bit deeper.
The show happens on President's Day weekend next year, which is February 15th, 16th, and 17th. The application deadline is September 23rd. So if there's any more information you need to know about this show, you know what to do. Log on to Zapplication and read all about it and get your application in. Well, we talked a little earlier about jurying, and I know that's every artist's favorite topic is getting into the nuts and bolts of jurying. I'm curious as to how you run your jury and what you think is important about an art fair jury.
Yeah, so our jury really has not changed. I really inherited this jury process from the previous executive director, Cindy Larrick. I had been a volunteer for her, as I mentioned, for many years, for over a decade. And this was one of my volunteer roles, was sitting in and helping with the jury. So I always knew the gravity of the jury process, the sanctity of it. I hate to elevate it to such a word, but it really is one of, if not the most important thing that I do with this organization is the jury. We take it very seriously. And so our process is that we have a panel of 5 on our jury. We have 3 jurors who will also come back and do our on-site jury for the art fair. They're the ones that hand out the awards.
Okay.
To complement that, we have 2 peer jurors. So we have 2 exhibiting or past exhibiting art fair artists also on our panel. So that panel of 5, they are the ones that select the show. They work together as a team. I am there to provide assistance. I answer questions. I help with any clarification that the jurors might need with regards to, price or artist statement or anything like that. Anything that they need help with, I'm there. But really, it's up to the jury, those 5 jurors, to select the show.
How important do you think it is? And I know this topic has come up in a number of different formats, but how important do you think it is to have those 2 peer jurors on your jury?
I really think it's crucial. It's so important to have these peers on the jury because they understand the St. Louis Art Fair in a way that some of our jurors may not. They understand also good and bad actors and
Right.
Can share their experiences, um, their personal experiences to an extent. Of course, there's so many applications that it doesn't often come down to that, but in our jury we have 3 rounds minimum. First round, our jurors vote yes, no, maybe, and an application has to receive 5 no's to be removed from the next round. So we're pretty transparent about our process. So I don't mind speaking to this.
And that's really just like a thinning out round, right? Just to kind of cut it down to who would even be in contention. Like if it's a definite no, then, move on.
Yeah, we may see 10 to 15% of the applicants removed in round 1. It's not as many as you would think.
Okay.
And then round 2, there is a little bit more consideration. You'll start to see more discussion happening amongst the jurors, starting with round 2. But really, it's round 3 that you really see conversations happening, and we see jurors speaking with one another, asking questions. And those peer jurors, especially for round 3, I think they are just instrumental in helping to provide guidance, life experience, and they help to provide balance because I believe that they truly are thinking of a balanced show.
I think it's incredibly important as well, and I appreciate you talking about it. But I know that there are certain people who are very vocal or have been in the past that it should be all blind, it should be all people that aren't. It's going to be nepotism if you aren't. But the truth of the matter, in my opinion, is that the people who are on the street know the best what they are looking at and what we see, and through that filter, you've been able to put on an amazing and diverse show year after year, and it's not the same people. People that have been in your show in the past don't get accepted this year or next or however it goes. It's always a very honest jury.
Yeah, and it can be difficult.
When you say that the peer jurors provide context, like what sorts of things, like rule infractions or cheaters, if they know something, like does that just bring the conversation up and say, this is something we should look at that might not be right for this show?
Correct. I feel that the peer jurors notice things that our other jurors may not. They take a more critical lens and they'll say, this is not up to the quality of the St. Louis Art Fair. and that will happen when you will see, an artist who their application says they do original oil painting, but then you'll see in the booth shot, it's cluttered. You'll see reproductions in there. You might see note cards in there. And those peer jurors are like, something's wrong with this, or the peer jurors also look at pricing too, and they'll say, something's off with this. If they're pricing the work like this low, are we really looking at originals? Are we really looking at work that was produced by that applicant's hand?
Right.
So they bring up some critical questions that others may miss. And so I do appreciate those insights.
Yeah, that production studio red flag of low-priced jewelry that, imported items or mass-produced that's a huge one.
How do you handle if there's conflict in the jury room around perhaps a specific applicant or something?
I try to let the jury really talk it through. If we are on a time crunch, if it's Sunday and it's getting late in the day and I know we still have 100 applications to get through, I may suggest, hey, has anyone thought of the wait list? If you can't come to a resolution on this application, we do have a wait list. And usually that will help the jury, and they'll say, well, okay.
Right.
Move it for along. Those that yes.
When you guide a jury, do you give them certain criteria with like, okay, professionalism, carrying something off as far as like quality of work? And I mean, I remember talking to Jay Long about this, and he had gotten hot over not your jury, but somebody else where he'd scored really low. And he's like, well, how do you, like, you may not like me, but how do you score me this low in this particular thing? Like, clearly I've studied and I know how to pull this off. And it was a different system of like a 1 through 10 or whatever. But do you give them some kind of guideline as far as what to look for? It's like, okay, we want, these 5 things, like it's professionalism, whether you've carried it off, whether they're, the skill level as well as an artistic eye, or do you just what do you like?
Yeah, so we do say that the applications should be scored on artistic excellence. That's really what it comes down to, not your personal preference. It really should come down to, how is the work presented? Is it presented well? Is this application presented well? Bias should be left at the door. Of course, we know that implicit bias is very difficult to leave at the door. So we actually read a statement to our jurors every day before jury starts, and it really discusses, trying to leave their bias at the door. What they're looking for is artistic excellence, and that can come in all forms. So we try to leave that bias at the door. For example, for when you say artistic excellence, most people, what pops in their mind is work like Michelangelo, Degas, Monet. But, that's all Western art history. It's not Eastern art. You're leaving off so many continents and countries when you talk about artistic excellence. And so trying to change people's perspective in that way can be difficult, but we do try. And something I believe that helps the St. Louis Art Fair and the jury process is we do review. As a part of the jury, we always show our returning award winners their applications prior to viewing the applicant pool. And I believe that does help our jurors. They see the applicants that are in the show, and it helps them then to create a show around what they know is already going to be exhibited at the St. Louis Art Fair.
Kind of sets the bar a little bit, maybe, too?
It does set the bar. I agree.
One question I have is, we've talked about this on the podcast, about different styles of jurying, and yours encourages conversation and consensus and that. How valuable do you feel that is in a jury versus just straight scoring and the conversation is kept at a minimum?
I really appreciate that we're continuing to do a projected jury because it allows for that real-time conversation, like you were saying, between these jurors. We get them together in one room, and so they have to talk it out. If there's disagreement over an application. If I have 5 no's and 1 yes, it's why? Why is that? Do we want to see this application again? Do we want to keep this application through to the next round? And the jurors can have an honest conversation about that. If it is going to be viewed in the next round, why? What is the reasoning for it? And the jurors really can have an honest discussion about that with one another. And sometimes a juror might change their mind and say, maybe I am a no. But then sometimes they're like, nope, I'm going to see this application again. Keep my yes and push it through. And we respect that, and we love that integrity, and we always honor and respect, because as we always tell our jurors, it's not one person that selected the show. All 5 of them speak with one voice when they select the show.
The idea of a blind jury, when you invite peer jurors into a conversation, kind of goes out the window. In some extent, they try to be respectful to the blind nature of it. But if they're trying to have, say, a super diverse show, and hey, let's invite this new up and coming, I've never seen this work, and here's an artist that they know is not that, your peer jurors, and your other 3 are going for it. I mean, how do you step in? Can you at all? Or if your peer jurors know something is not this that they're trying to go for, do you let them just hash it out?
I will say that I noticed this year, more than past years at our jury, this question of authenticity came up quite a bit with applications. And really, our jurors themselves were saying, is this authentic? Is this application created out of a place of, personal knowledge and personal experience, or is it appropriating another's culture and another's experience?
That's important.
And I feel that came up quite a bit this year, and I really respected our jurors being so thoughtful. And I did sit back as much as I could, let them have their conversation, and I did not interrupt unless I had to. And I did want to share, because they so wanted to make sure that the applicants that were getting into the show were, as I said, were authentic and representing an honest perspective, a personal perspective. And if I could have something to add to the conversation, to their deliberations, their discussions, that was helpful, I tried, but I rarely had to be honest with you guys. I felt like our jurors really came at decisions on their own. They were able to read that authenticity. They were able to read the genuine quality of some of the applications without any feedback from me. So I was very, very impressed with that.
So I know that transparency, authenticity, all of that is very important to you and to your show. The one thing that is a love-hate kind of thing for some artists is the transparency of sharing the scores publicly. No one's name is assigned to it. It's applicant 0215789, but even still, it's out there. I just nailed Will's a number, right?
Yeah, that's me. Hey, you mother. No, seriously though, you can't you though? Like if you go back to look at the certain thing and you you can look up somebody's number and then look up what they scored.
You can, yes.
Yeah, I hate that.
You can review that. So something that we will tell especially our emerging artists post jury, I tell them, I say, go back, look at those applicants that received 5 yeses and match up and try to look back and see, and then we'll review, why do you think this, application received 5 yeses? And then we'll kind of break it down and really have honest conversations about it. In the same way as, those applications that received 5 no's, like right off the bat, what was going on in this application that caused our jury to give those 5 no's? So it has been a helpful tool for me. The only thing that I say was probably the most difficult are the comments, because we're limited in how many characters our note takers can record and zap. So we're limited on the comments. So they often sound very curt and short. And that's really just because of character limitations. So I do go in and try to smooth out some of the comments that our volunteers record as best to my ability. best I can. But I do feel it's important. I do feel it's an important tool to learn from.
Well, speak to that. So why is that? To be able to help make your own application better? Like if you can look to see maybe what a strong application looks like versus a not strong?
Correct. And so I think that is helpful to see the applications that were strong, the applications that received like resounding yeses, because in our case, it's yes, no, maybe for St. Louis. So those applications that did receive that positive feedback or negative, it gives you a chance to say, like, what am I doing right in my application? What can I learn from this application that will translate to my own? So I do think it can be helpful.
To the people who want the help.
Who didn't get in, who might not have gotten into the show.
But what about the people that don't want to help people? Like, I don't, like, can that be an option that they don't share their images with the rest of the world?
I opt out.
Like, I do not give you consent, Sarah. You cannot have, do not have my consent to show my application.
No, it's definitely, it's something that we can add because, I know as much as people love those check boxes in Zap and those answers, that is definitely something that we can add that says, no, don't share them. Because we do ask that, if we can share images, on social media and promotion. So it could be something that,
my helping days are over. I'm not helping anybody anymore.
Every man for themselves.
That's right. Take that advice. Not too good.
Well, another thing I wanted to ask you is there are art show directors out in the industry who maintain friendships with artists. And when you have situations where, let's say, an artist who you're friends with doesn't get into a show, does that, how do you maintain that professional boundary and that balance between, like, it just didn't work out, the jury said no, and you know what I mean? Maintain that friendship with the artist.
She doesn't have any friendships with any hacks who are going to get shitty about it. How about that? You got to pick your friendships wisely, Sarah.
It can be difficult. It can be difficult. Not even friendships, but just artists that I admire and artists that I see at other shows. And I encourage them to apply to St. Louis and they don't jury in. I mean, that hurts. I mean, I feel like a jerk when that happens, to be honest. And it really is difficult. I'm a rule follower. I mean, I was raised in a Catholic home and small farming community. And I just cannot break a rule. It's very difficult for me. So when it comes to the jury, it's really tough when I have to give someone bad news. I try to be as equal and as balanced and as fair as I can, and I just have to send out those notifications and sit back
press
and
send on a Friday at 5 p.m. before you head out to the bar.
And I joke about that. Like I say, you're not friends with any. Like I do find that to be a pet peeve of mine. Like that kind of professionalism being. Like there is a certain line that I feel like we all know exists between those friendships of, or just congenial relationships that we have with directors, where it's like, hey, we've all been there before. If you didn't get in, you didn't get in. It's just like we know. I mean, I say this all the time. It's like, say this awesome show that you want to be in has 150 artists and there are 500 worthy applicants and they get 1,200. It's like, well, I trust that I made it past the other 700 to the 500. But, once it gets to the 500 worthy applicants, it's any man's game, any person's game.
Like you could have several shows from the people who got rejected.
Yeah.
I mean, or, at least a couple of shows from the applicants that applied.
Right. So I don't know. I just think it's a certain amount of, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but a professionalism that is our duty to have when dealing with these kind of relationships too. So
no. And I would say that for by and large, everyone is just so gracious and kind and understanding. And so that is definitely helps soften the blow. I think I feel more guilty than most. I think what's tough is right around when our notifications go out, pretty soon after that is Belleville Art on the Square, which takes place just across the river from us in Belleville, Illinois. And it's a small show. It's about 100 artists, but there's quite a few St. Louis Art Fair artists that exhibit at Belleville. And so it's I always say it's the start of my apology tour. It's when I go to shows and I mean, and I don't shy away from it. I'll go to every booth and I take the licks and because I feel it's part of my job. I want to hear from the artists. I want to hear what's going right for them, what's not going well for them. And that's one thing too with the I try to stick with the wait list is I'm also very honest about our wait list in St. Louis. When I have a drop from the show, which is, by the way, this has been a very strange summer. Hardly any drops so far.
Okay.
I mean, knock on wood.
That tells you how the economy is going. People are, you know what I mean, holding on to those shows. But anyway, go ahead.
No, I totally understand. I totally get that. But what I do is when I do have a drop, I look first at that artist's, medium, their category, and then I'll even go even farther. So if I lose a painter, I immediately will look at my wait list for a painter. If that painter happens to be, non-representational, I will look for an abstract painter. And I really do try to replace that dropped artist with someone from the wait list that is from a similar or category at least,
Right.
and really try to keep that balance of the show. It's what the jury wanted. It's what the jury selected. So I'm trying to honor that balance that they selected. But then also, I'm typically at this point in the game, I'm replacing that booth. I've already set the layout of the show. I can't put, a glass artist next to a glass artist. I can't
Thank you.
have, So it does, the wait list is something that I, usually try to be as thoughtful with as possible when selecting from there to make sure the show's balanced.
Does that give you some kind of freedom? That kind of the wait list, does that give you some kind of director freedom too, where you're like, okay, just get these people that I like into my wait list and I can not like, but like respect, and like, is that kind of a tool that you like to use? Like, is that a good way to help balance out a show?
It is, but again, I usually in the jury process, I try to zip it. I try to stay as quiet as I can. I try not to influence our jurors. If I did that, my wait list would be, 100 artists long.
Right.
And if I kept saying, why don't you put them in the wait list too? No, I really do try to respect the wait list as much as I can, and really it's there to serve that purpose, to help continue to keep a balanced show.
I don't know if you are able to identify cheaters in the jury room, or how do you okay, these are the people that have been selected. Then do they go through another form of vetting to make sure that they follow the rules and standards, or is that figured out before they even get to the jury room?
It typically happens post-jury. If there are bad actors, if there is a clear bad actor that made it through, that is known as maybe has broken rules or has done something that has, as I said, against the rules of the show, it typically doesn't make it that far. But if it does, and someone got into the show that shouldn't have, there is vetting that happens after the jury, before the selections announced, as best to our ability. If an artist is unknown to me, I do try to make phone calls, check in, see if, as we were just saying, they're a known factor to someone, and I try to get as much background and feedback on them as possible before sending out those notifications.
It seems like a production studio, for example, if you go to their website, a lot of times they want to put out the image that they're a big organization. And yet when they apply to an art fair, they want to look like they're a small organization. So sometimes just the website alone gives away who they are and what they're about.
Correct. Sometimes all it takes is just a little bit of some digital sleuthing to figure that out. But sometimes it can be just as quick as calling some trusted confidants, and asking some questions too. And that usually gets an answer pretty quick. If I can just call somebody and ask if, this applicant is known to them, what can they tell me about them? So yeah, it's a little bit of both, a little bit of research and a little bit of, trying to lean on colleagues for advice.
There was a thing that happened in Oklahoma City. You had like a directors conference or something like that. And we were talking to Camille about that. And it's like, I love that. I love the fact that you guys have that you get together and can talk shop amongst yourselves is something. And it has to happen with your show because you do have kind of you have a lot of directors walking around or a few walking around helping you do the show. I mean, it's great.
Yeah, no, it really helps. As I say, like I for me in particular, I check my ego at the door. Like I really try to embrace my community and my colleagues and learn from them. And when I see somebody doing something kick ass, and I'm like, yeah, I want that program at my show, and I'll give them all the credit and all the praise. Like we're going to implement. I finally was able to get a sponsor to implement mobility tours. I saw this at again Cherry Creek and some other shows where they can have these tours before the festival opens where you can take folks with mobility issues and actually drive them with some golf carts around the show. I'm seeing programs from other shows, and we learn so much when we can just get in a room together and talk about what programs are winning, what programs are not doing that great, and really hear from one another. So as many opportunities as I can get to be in the same room with my colleagues, I'm going to take it. I just love those opportunities. And it's great that Robin Markowitz with ArtLinks, still is organizing these. I know it's a great effort on her part and very appreciative of those opportunities to be in the same room with my colleagues.
That's cool. Robin, I know from the East Coast and being part of, I've mentioned this before, but the Bethesda Row show, and then she went on and did Rockville. And what else is she involved in? What else does ArtLinks do? It's several shows in that Eastern Virginia kind of area, Maryland.
Yes, there's quite a few of them in Philadelphia, and so she is involved in quite a few. But what she also does is great is she has this huge database, and so she's she does that annual survey every year. Really provides some valuable information for our industry. Just her survey results alone, and what she's able to hear on an annual basis and see trends. Especially demographics. It's been very helpful.
Demographics of
artists, exhibiting artists, and especially again, that's why emerging artist programs are so important to keep this renewal.
You're trying to say we're all old, Sarah? Is that what you're seeing? Is that the trend?
Get a nice way of saying
with
that.
Those crusty old guys.
Yeah.
Well, it's really a testament to you and to directors like you who are able to check your ego at the door and say, hey, I want to know what you know that might be something that can help improve what I do. And I think that's really, really cool. I have a hard time with that sometimes, getting advice or whatever, asking for it, but I think it's really remarkable.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Well, I don't know how we can continue to do what we do without that, because if you always do only what you've known, I mean, I hate that stagnation. You need to constantly reinvent or at least try something new, or else if you just stand still, people are just going to pass you by. So you need to continually try to think of new ideas and find what's working for other shows and test it out. See if it'll work in your market. Maybe it will, maybe it won't.
It seems like that post-COVID, when you guys had to make some changes and you've adopted some of those changes to stick with the show, that quad system. Speaking of Bethesda Row, they've done that for a long time with the 4 booths, where you have one corner that's attached and, the quad system where people are kind of spread out. It makes for a really nice open show, and I'm glad you guys stuck with that.
Everybody gets a corner.
Yes, everybody.
Right?
You get a corner, and you get a corner.
Thanks, Oprah.
That was great. And also the city of Clayton allowing us to do early setup on now 2 streets. So we have 2 streets where we can do early Thursday setup. And that was a post-COVID implementation, and that's been successful, and we're continuing that. So yeah, there have been some things that have happened operationally post-COVID that, I've been thrilled with.
You've gotten a couple of accolades from friends of mine. Obviously, jewelers are near and dear to my heart and household. But as far as security goes, I had offered to walk an artist back to the hotel that we're staying at. She's like, hey, I've got an escort, which is huge. Can you talk about security a little bit within the St. Louis Arts Festival and just our industry in general?
Yeah, no, it is. Security is something that we all worry about and we all are concerned with. And we're fortunate that we have such a great partnership with the city of Clayton. As I said, I was a city employee, so I know these employees. They were coworkers of mine, especially in the police department. Love those men and women of the Clayton Police Department. And they are there for me, for the show, for whatever we need. Something that we implemented, gosh, now it's probably been almost 10 years now. But Cindy Lyric implemented this first. And it was this concern over what happens to the jewelers at the end of the night. Yes, our show takes place in an affluent suburb. Clayton is a beautiful community, but there is still that fear that you don't know who is following you, who could be casing a show, who could be coming in and to look to take advantage of the situation.
And we have late hours too.
We have late
when
hours.
We're wrapping up the show, a lot of times we're going till after dark.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it can feel, especially once the show closes and artists close up their booths, either all of the attendees have found their way to a bar or restaurant somewhere, but it does feel like the streets are a little quiet too.
Right.
And it can be nerve-wracking to try to get back from the festival site, those few blocks away to either the hotel or to a vehicle. And so we started offering escorts, police escorts for our jewelers at the St. Louis Art Fair. And it has been so successful ever since it was implemented because it provides a peace of mind for me as a show director, but especially for those artists. And so we have a system where those jewelers, they meet our police officers who have their golf carts, and they will provide that escort either back to the hotel or back to a vehicle for the jewelers to make sure they make it back safely.
So they drive them then. They have a golf court. That's sweet. Because it would get awkward talking to the cop for the 20-minute walk. It's just gets weird. Yeah. You ever shoot a guy? No. So that's really cool. I love that, and I think I just wonder too, about, not to be grim, but we all worry about the somebody having a gun at a show or something like that. How do you deal with that kind of security? Is it just that partnership with
public
police?
safety kind of thing? Yeah.
No, we really do rely heavily on the Clayton Police Department. They probably haven't noticed this. I don't know if you're on the site early enough, but we have a bomb dog that sniffs the site every morning. And they check everything. We're fortunate to have that service provided for us. We also have, I'm sure, sometimes I think you can recognize them. We have a lot of plainclothes police officers, and I feel like they can be pretty easy to recognize. I feel like I've recognized them pretty quickly
Those
now.
shiny shoes.
Yeah. Or they try to dress ridiculously. It'll be someone and dressed almost like they've got a kind of a mullet and, maybe some acid wash jeans. And I'm like,
okay.
Yeah. Are you a police officer? So, but it's great. So
How did you know?
Yeah. So we're pretty lucky to have that kind of security. So not only do we have the armed officers at, all the intersections and entrance points, but then we have these plainclothes officers throughout the festival all weekend long that you may not even notice. So that has been a huge help for our festival. And then we just stay on top of trends. You can bet when I saw what happened to Anne Marie, I shot that to our police lieutenant who is in charge, my liaison for the St. Louis Art Fair. And I'm like, you need to be aware of what happened in Chicago. Here are, screenshots of, the suspects. And, I was sending them everything. And just so they could be aware of this trend. Of course, they are aware of these rings happen, these theft rings, and they're keeping their eyes and ears open to any chatter, and so they're very much be aware of what's going on.
Good. That's really comforting.
Something I know that being an art fair, the executive director for the art fair, you have so many stakeholders that you need to make happy. You know, you need to have artists that want to come back and keep selling. You have financial people up here, and sometimes all of the different intentions or goals amongst the different stakeholders might not mesh very well. Can you talk about how you juggle that and how you sift through that and try and, have some kind of a path or a plan forward?
It is definitely a delicate dance that we have to do as executive directors, or, those that are in charge of, nonprofits, because yes, we have a board of directors and they're my bosses, especially the board chair. I mean, they are who I answer to. But then for me, we wouldn't have a show without our artists. And so they are up on this pedestal for me as well. And so, but I will say that I always keep the best intentions for our artists front of mind. I would never do anything that would negatively impact our artist experience at the show. So sometimes I may have a board member, have a really great idea that, they really want me to try to implement. And I get the little tingly feeling in the back of my neck, and I think that's not going to be good. That's not going to be good. And you have to find a way to try to redirect that board member into a new idea that they can then take ownership of and adopt, that keeps the integrity of the show intact, but still keeps my bosses happy. So trying to find that balance. But you're right, there are quite a number of stakeholders that I'm always thinking of, especially our sponsors too. Our sponsors, our volunteers, community members that are here in the city of Clayton. There are a lot of folks that I need to appease. And how do I prioritize that? It's always comes down to the integrity of the show.
It's a dance. It sounds like a big dance.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I also feel that a lot of show directors, I think we all have some kind of a dissociative disorder of some kind or another, where you can be one person in one moment and then you have to flip a switch and become a completely different person, and check emotions at the door, because you always have to stay, even keel. So you do have to have a way to kind of, take all of that rage or anger or anything that you're feeling at any given moment and just put it in this little box and set it over there. I'll get
Could
to
you
it.
offer Will and I some classes on that? That might be a good idea.
I feel like the parallels are pretty strong. It's like, okay, let me make something that is directly from my heart in my little room all by myself for 3 weeks, and then take it out on the street for people to talk about. It's like, the parallels are there. You do have to check your emotions at the door and put on your sales hat versus your creation hat. And yeah, it's tough.
It is. Yeah,
but you do a good job at it. I mean, you it's about making people feel like they're heard. You know what I mean? That their concerns are heard, even if you don't get what you're looking for. I'm sure from either side of the spectrum of whatever, if you're a financial person or an artist or whatever, at least if you were heard and okay, well, she couldn't pull for us in this one, but that it was important to you. And that, I think you pull that off big time.
Oh, thank you. I hope so. I really do hope so, because it is important to me. I mean, obviously I came into this industry from the artist relations team. That I always knew the show is all about the artists, and that was always my number one priority. And it's been easy to carry that over into this role as executive director, because it always was my priority. So it's going to continue to be. Yes, I still have to work with a lot of other folks, like these board of directors. They're wonderful people and they mean well. I'm empathetic, and I always see how people are coming at me, like where they're coming from. I always take that into consideration too.
So I wanted to ask you too, what does that day of show look like? Because I noticed there's a similarity in some of the big pros when I get, I'm lucky enough to see Amy Curley or Tara running around at Cherry Creek. There's never any kind of panic with them at all? They're always like, hey, this is the way it is. We've already set up this process to work exactly the way it's working, and not saying it doesn't go without problem, but like I see that kind of, if we're lucky enough to run into you at the show, it's like, hey, are you on day of show? Do you have to put on a certain kind of hat, or you have to wear them all at once? Like, are you dealing with sponsors at that point, or is there something that you know you're going to be dealing with?
Yeah. So, and I let my team know this too. We're the same way in St. Louis. We have a very precise timeline of things that have to get done at certain times of day. Starting at 4 or 5 a.m. We've got a schedule of what needs to be accomplished in order for the show to come to life. And so we all keep an eye on that timeline. Of course, I'm checking in, making sure things are getting accomplished. But my priority is artists and checking in, see how the artists are doing. Sponsors don't come on site until later on Friday, day of show. So I have a little bit of time there. My emerging artists come on site at 8 a.m. I'm there to kind of hold their hand, make sure they get to where they need. Then my mentors get on site at 9 a.m., make sure they're coming on, make sure they know where they're going, they're getting what they need. And then it's really my priority is the artists, unless I get pulled away for another reason. Typically, I have a lot of press and media on that day. I have a lot of interviews that I try to make myself available for because it's promoting the show. But, I had quite a surprise in 2013, something that has never happened before, and I don't hope will never happen again, that you might have heard on the day on Friday, the morning of my show. I got a call from my public works guy in charge, and all he said was, Sarah, can you come meet me on North Central? I need to talk to you about something.
Not good.
Yeah, that's not good. I was like, oh no. I'm like, I'll be right there. And I walk over there, and he's this big bear of a guy. I mean, he is huge, man. And he's just so sweet to me too. He's like, well, Sarah, this building's been condemned. We're going to have to put concrete barricades 10 feet into the street onto your footprint. We're going to have to move all of these booths. What do you want me to do? And I took it in. It's that disassociative thing where it's like, okay, can you give me a minute? And he's like, sure. I walked away. I got on my cell phone. Thank God Cindy Lyric was there. And first person I called in tears. I'm crying at this point. I'm like, Cindy, I need you. And she's like, I'll be right there. And she came and we talked through it, and we agreed on a plan forward and what I was going to do. And we got through it. It impacted 10 booths on the festival site, but I did not have to relocate them. I was able to keep them on that street. I just had to move them.
And this was just last year, right?
This was just last year.
Okay, sorry. I thought you'd said 2013. Sorry.
2023. I'm sorry. 2023.
No, that's cool. I just wanted to make sure, because I remember that from last year and talking to friends that were moved and slid over. I mean, it ended up fine, right? I mean,
it did. I had 10 guys from Public Works there. I mean, all together, like lifting up booths and moving them, and I mean, it was pretty great. But that tied up that critical time for me too. It was that time of like 10 a.m. to noon. It was really tough to be tied up with that during that time when I had so many other things happening. But I'm really looking forward, though, to this year for Day of, because we have a new associate director who will be in charge of operations and load in and load out. And her name's Megan Zaranek. And Megan has come to us. She used to be with ArtFest Fort Myers in Florida.
Awesome.
But yeah, she joined the St. Louis Art Fair team earlier this year.
So you get to split yourself in half and delegate, right?
Exactly.
She gets to take over that part.
Your right hand kind of retired. So tell me her name.
Tracy Morgan. And Tracy didn't retire. Tracy is now working with the Regional Arts Commission in St. Louis, which is perfect. It was exactly where she should be.
That's awesome.
She's doing great work with them, still working with artists in the region. She has a mural project right now she's working on. So I'm really proud of Tracy.
That's fantastic.
But yeah, Megan has been a powerhouse and has already been implementing some great technological changes to our organization that are going to streamline us. And I'm really
fantastic.
Really looking forward to this year.
Sarah, one last question to kind of wrap up the talk. It's been a fantastic conversation. So on the heels of you just talking about like a big struggle like that, how you handle that, what would you say is like kind of like your greatest joy working for the art festival and with the community and the artists and the stakeholders? What is the thing that brings you the most joy?
And remember, we are all listening.
Yeah.
The board of directors are going, pick me.
I would say what brings me the most joy in my role as executive director for the St. Louis Art Fair is to see sales happen, to see people walking out of my festival arms full of work that they're taking to their homes and that they're going to enjoy for the rest of their lives. But having those moments with our exhibiting artists at the close of the show and to get those big hugs and to say, when they say, thank you, this made my year, or thank you, I can go home to my studio now and just create. Thank you, I can cancel Plaza. I've made enough for the year and I can just go home. I feel bad. Sorry, Plaza. I feel terrible when that happens. But it really is a great feeling to know that our artists have done well enough that they've hit their budget for the year. They've hit their revenue goals and they can just go home and relax knowing that they'll be okay. They don't have to worry. That is pure joy to me. And I love those hugs and I love that the most at the end of the show.
That's a great answer. And
you
guys have one of the best unprompted after party art show parties at the hotel there at that bar. The bartenders, man, we could warn them ahead of time that it's coming. But good Lord, it's always a great time.
Quitting time isn't anytime soon because the artists are going to come and you're going to be here for a while.
That's right.
Well, this is a good feel-good ending. Thank you so much for telling us all about you and the show. And this has been a great talk. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time. We know how precious that is, especially this time of year. So good luck and good weather, and we will see you in St. Louis.
All right. Thanks, you guys.
All right, bye.
All right. Bye.
Man, that was a great talk we had. I cannot believe she had time for a couple of guys like us here getting ready for the show here 3 weeks before the St. Louis Arts Festival. And I'm loving the fact that we get to have her on the show right before people leave town for Missouri.
I literally thought that it was a pipe dream. Maybe she'd be like, oh, yeah, we'll talk to you guys, in September or at the end of September when it's all done and we can do an unpacking kind of thing. But no, she made time for us, and that's really appreciated.
Absolutely. Douglas, it's been great talking with you, great talking with her. I say we get back into the studio and get to work.
Lots to do. All right, my friend, thanks so much. We'll talk to you later.
You too, buddy. Bye. This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.